So Ballpoint released this last week, and people have opinions on it, which is great. You should always have opinions on things, but I wanted to focus on two very specific opinions that I got from friends of mine. I asked them if they read the comic and what they thought about it. I'm going to keep them anonymous here, but one friend said they read it, and there were little moments here and there that they enjoyed. They liked some of the references and some of the more, deep Transformers lore cuts, but ultimately that it just wasn't for them. They know that it's intended for a younger audience than themselves, and so they don't think it's bad, but it's just not something that they necessarily enjoyed because it's not something that's really targeted towards them, and it's not something they're interested in, which is perfectly fine. The other response to the comic, though, is a little more troubling, and it comes in two parts. That first part being, it's made for a younger audience or kids, therefore it's bad, and because this was made, that means that the things that we really want for the community and the franchise are not going to be made. This was really concerning to hear. Let's talk about that first point. Something being made for a younger audience, or kids, if we want to say that, doesn't immediately make it any less than anything else. I talked about this in a video actually quite a while ago, asking who is Transformers for. And it's this weird thing that we do on the internet and in real life too, where we see something that is targeted towards children, and we immediately think it is of lesser value. Now, personally, I think the reason that we do this is because children's media, things that are made for a younger audience, are often made cheaper. Because children don't always, nitpick and micromanage and get into the weeds of media or even, physical things like toys. A younger audience is not going to analyze a TV show or, again, even a toy as much as an older audience. And for that matter, I do think that it's okay if that media or that product is maybe not as robust as it needs to be for an older audience, but that doesn't immediately make it worse. And we shouldn't look at children's media, as we're calling it, as always something that has to be dumbed down or lesser than. The second part of this person's statement is really what made me make this video, and that is, because something like Ballpoint exists, that means that something else cannot. This is just something that we don't know about. This is something I'm seeing happening a lot too with the Cyberworld TV show. I have not watched it yet. It looks interesting. I don't know if I will watch it because, again, for me personally, there's nothing there that is intriguing me. But there's people who are taking that too far to then say, because Cyberworld exists, because Ballpoint exists, they are the reason we're not getting something else in Transformers that the fans want. And honestly, that's just, ironically, kind of childish. Again, it's fine if you don't want to consume that product. It's fine if you say, hey, Cyberworld, Ballpoint, they're just not for me. They're for a younger audience, I'm not interested. That's fine. But to blame them for the fact that you don't have something for a more mature audience is just ridiculous in my mind. Is that really where we are here at the community? People saying, no, I'm not going to read Ballpoint. I'm not going to support it. I'm not going to do anything about it because its existence means that something else cannot exist. All of that being said, how is Ballpoint as a product? Well, Chapter 1 of Ballpoint's story we've already actually had. It came out during Free Comic Book Day, and it introduces Ballpoint to the world of Cybertron. He's this small Decepticon character who tells tall tales. He talks about how he, was the pen who is mightier than the sword on Cybertron, and how Megatron was his best friend, and he helped defeat the Autobots. And we quickly see that none of this is true. He's telling this story to his best friend, a blender named Smoothie, and Starscream and Soundwave are pretty much laughing at him saying, this is all fake. You made all of this up. Something I'd like to point out here is obviously this story does not need to tie in with any other continuity, and I love that because the characters are all drawn very strangely, and they're drawn almost in this office-style nature. Soundwave with this little teacup with his pinky out, and Starscream's got a cup of coffee. It's very casual and laid back, and I like it. I think it's fun, and there's lots of opportunities for the creators to just kind of do whatever they want to with it, especially like with Shockwave when he shows up, or some of my favorite gags in the entire series here, which is Soundwave constantly getting Frenzy and Rumble mixed up. For people saying that this comic is only for children, I would point to this as a clear point to say, hey, children who are not familiar with Transformers already, or have a very base knowledge of Transformers, they're not going to understand this joke. They're not going to understand the whole Frenzy is red, Rumble is blue debate. So having this in here is obviously something for an older audience who might be reading it with their children to kind of laugh and chuckle and say, hey, this here is obviously meant for me. And I think it's a great addition. Also, I would love to point out one of the posters in the Nemesis, which is Cybertron World Champion Thumb Wrestler 1986. It's hilarious. Chapter 2 continues this kind of silly world where almost everybody is incompetent to a degree. I want to point out something I talked about in my original Ballpoint video. Laserbeak having these giant googly eyes is just weird, but I find it funny. Something else also interesting here is that the intel that Shockwave gives Megatron, Ballpoint has written on top of. And it's funny because this is not explained at all in any way, but Megatron can't even read it. And part of me wonders, can he not read this paper because there's just too much text on here? Or can he not read it because it's written in English? If that's the case, how does Ballpoint know how to read and write English? Anyways, it's silly, and it's just played for laughs. Well, the disk drive that is used to show off Megatron's plans has actually been overwritten by Ballpoint. He's got a song and dance number, and he obviously realizes that he's made a huge, huge mistake. But Megatron needs to leave for the solar farm at once, and I love this image of Starscream carrying everybody on him up into the air. It's a hilarious picture to see all these characters just kind of hanging and dangling off of him, and the fact that, you know, they're totally going to fall and crash and whatnot. Megatron and the others show up to the solar farm, and of course, Rumble just immediately starts to destroy it, thinking that he's doing the right thing for Megatron, and of course, Soundwave gets his name wrong once again. But then the Autobots show up, and of course, Ballpoint has failed at his job to warn the Decepticons that they have showed up. Seeing the Autobots pop up finally is really fun, and it gives me very Generation 1 vibes. You know, these characters just saying all of these one-liners while they're attacking and whatnot, seeing them transform, and seeing them drawn in this very specific style is very fun. Of course, the Decepticons retreat, and Ballpoint turns around to see them, and then warns them, obviously, far too late. And that's the end of Chapter 2. Again, short, simple, and sweet. In Chapter 3, of course, the Decepticons have been beaten, and of course, as per usual, Starscream is for some reason sitting on Megatron's throne. Megatron comes back, and as per usual, as we come to expect, gives him a bit of a beatdown for his failures. His ultimate punishment, though, is that he has to make an Energon shake for Megatron. Absolutely. I love this. Probably my favorite page and panel comes in this chapter, when Megatron is just livid and he asks, "Why do you Decepticons continuously fail me?" And everybody points towards Ballpoint and just says, him. It's such a wonderful page that just displays the wacky characteristics and designs of these characters, and once again really just puts Ballpoint, you know, in the center of attention, not in a great way. Starscream returns with the Energon smoothie, but it's knocked out of his hand, and Smoothie is killed in the process. Ballpoint is kicked out, and Starscream says that banishment is a gift, he would have not been so merciful. And in an even better line, Soundwave says, "Do not return, we will also be changing the Wi-Fi password." After a short moment with Gnaw, Ballpoint decides that the way he can get back into the Decepticons is impressing Megatron, and we move into Chapter 4, where we see the Ark. Again, seeing the Ark and these Generation 1 characters almost in a kind of office setting is really fun. There's posters everywhere, and these characters are just goofy and wacky, and I really enjoy this. I kind of almost want to see this style in an animated format. Even though these characters are goofy and kind of exaggerated, Optimus Prime still kind of remains as this center character who is not changing. He talks about how he takes no pride in violence and that peace and protection is what he's striving for. Bumblebee and Wheeljack have a little bit of a interaction here that's pretty funny, and then we get into Sideswipe and Sunstreaker. Obviously these two brothers who we're going to see a little bit more of later, and they are just joking around. Jazz is telling extremely unfunny and corny jokes to Prowl, and of course they want to get Mirage's idea as if the joke is funny, but he just disappears and everybody just kind of leaves Jazz alone. Prowl runs outside where he's going to be taking over the post from Elita, and something that I love here is that they've given Prowl just a classic style cop mustache. It's perfect. To distract Prowl, who honestly isn't even really noticing Ballpoint in general, Ballpoint orders a bunch of pizzas? I mean, okay, sure, why not? They get all these pizzas and Ballpoint is able to run past into the Ark. A quick note, though, is that the pizzas apparently have batteries on them, and Prowl wants to know if that's even on the menu. Again, little moments like this, that these jokes necessarily aren't that funny, batteries on a pizza, but it's just the interaction between the human and Prowl that kind of makes you chuckle and go, they're obviously self-aware that this is a little bit ridiculous. Ballpoint gets inside the Ark even further with the help of Mirage, who is unaware of who he is, and he's going to mess up the Autobots entirely when it turns out that the printer he's trying to use needs a new driver installed. Again, this is not something that children are going to pick up on. At least for me, I see this and go, yep, every printer I've ever used needs a new driver, and it is the most infuriating thing in the world. The chapter continues with Ballpoint kind of being thrown and pushed around unknowingly by the Autobots, where he finally decides to attack them with psychological warfare. And now we're in Chapter 5. The first page on here shows us Sideswipe and Sunstreaker's room, and I love the fact that it says Lambros and just all of these different signs and designs on it is obviously some really deep cuts from Transformers lore. The Autobots, of course, are not fazed at all by Ballpoint's tricks of writing on their faces. He's a silly character, and the Autobots are just regular guys. Until Ballpoint decides to disguise himself and go into Optimus Prime's office, which I want to mention, it says that it's always open, and it kind of looks like a sad office. Although I do love the posters behind him. Ballpoint's disguise is as a dentist, and he tells Optimus that his teeth have not been cleaned in millions of years, but Optimus is worried when he says Transformers don't even have teeth. He's not even sure if he has a mouth. Again, there's some stuff here that doesn't really add up. Obviously, these characters do have some sort of teeth, but I just think it's funny that Optimus isn't even sure if he has a mouth himself. Optimus sees through this disguise, and he actually has a really nice chat with Ballpoint. Ballpoint talks about how he is the worst Transformer ever. He can't do anything right, and even as a Decepticon crony, he can't destroy any Autobots. But Optimus is, well, he's kind. He's nice to Ballpoint, and he tells him that when the opportunity arises, he's certain that his spark will burn brightly. He says, after all, there's an old Earth saying that says, the pen is mightier than the sword. The Decepticons have arrived at the Ark, though, and it's time for a final battle. Bumblebee is getting strangled over the canyon, which I just absolutely love. At this point, I just love Bumblebee getting beaten up, and a battle ensues with Ballpoint on the Autobots' side. After some shenanigans with Starscream and Bumblebee, Ballpoint is face-to-face with a Megatron who's ready to kill Optimus Prime. Megatron, of course, takes this time to still insult Ballpoint by calling him Felt Tip and telling him to kill Optimus Prime. Optimus and Ballpoint have a moment where they look at each other and nod, and Ballpoint transforms and spews his ink all over his eyes. That sounds a little bit weirder when I say it that way, but, I mean, how else am I supposed to say that? Megatron is defeated, the Decepticons retreat, and Optimus is incredibly proud of what Ballpoint has done. Such a little guy has been able to help outtake such a mighty monster like Megatron. And because of that, Optimus says that he doesn't need to go home because he is home. And he brands Ballpoint with an Autobot badge. Everybody congratulates him, and that's, for the most part, the end of the story, albeit not before a few extra pages. As Ballpoint is getting the tour of the Ark by Jazz, there is a new blender who he calls Smoothie. Nobody really understands him, but they're happy that he's along. We cut back to the Decepticon Tower, and Megatron, of course, is just livid. He is extremely angry, walking amongst the Decepticons who are all laughing at him. As the final page, we see the back of his butt plate, which has been written on it by Ballpoint to say, "Space Farts." And that's the end of Ballpoint. Now, there's so many more references and little tidbits of lore within this comic that I didn't cover. I saw some people commenting on a post that I made asking that I go through every single little reference from Generation 1 or really any facet and corner of Transformers. If you want to see all those, again, TF Wiki has an article on this, and they really do dive into the weeds of all the little things. But now at the end, what were my thoughts on Ballpoint? As a product, I have to admit, Ballpoint is not something for me. I probably won't read it again anytime soon. It's nothing that really changed the chemistry in my brain or even wowed me, but for the audience it's intended for, I think it's really, really good. Again, I cannot discount this as a bad product simply because it's not something I personally want or simply because it's for a younger audience. I think this is a great way for you, if you have children, to introduce your younger ones to Transformers. There's nothing in here that's too brutal or too hard to understand or nothing too violent, and there's some good lessons in here. That, of course, the pen is mightier than the sword, but also some of the talks that Optimus has with Ballpoint about finding a family. Overall, this is what Transformers is about, bringing in new fans. However old they may be, older, middle-aged, younger, wherever they are. Again, it hurts me so much to see something like Ballpoint get so much hate from people on the internet simply because it's not this dark, mature, gritty story that they want. It's okay that it's not that. Let it be its own thing. It's not a poorly made product. It may not be for you. That's perfectly fine to say. But I just don't understand the people who take one look at it, or maybe even read it and go, ugh, this is bad, simply because it's not what I want. It's okay for things to exist outside of what you want personally. Ballpoint is worth it if you have younger children. If you don't, you can skip it. It's alright. You're not missing too much. There's nothing groundbreaking here. But I do think that as a product, Transformers Worst Spot Ever Meet Ballpoint is lovely.